A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood Mikowski. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. This evening, once again, I begin with a thankful heart. I pause to recognize the contribution of Sir David Seal and the folks at the People's Market for respecting Barbadian history and heritage and for contributing to the production of this series, My Community. We thank you. Our discussion this evening begins with a very popular recreational sport played in almost every Barbadian community in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and certainly during the period under discussion in this series. You will learn of how the boys improvised, how they looked around their environment and used the available resources in the production of the required tools to play the game.
There was also often a cricket match or cricket matches. Up the road versus down the road. Now we had a dividing line which marked off up the road and then down the road. And although it was not a big part, big district, you'd be surprised to see that we could find enough players, and some people were left out and were very angry that they were left out. That was a big match. You know, I was part of the down the road crowd, and we did not want the up the road team to beat us, and vice versa, of course. So that provided a lot of pleasure and stiff competition for the boys in the Savannah. Right, so that was the way in which Sussex Cricket Ground was used. Later, it was used to play football as well. But in the early days, we couldn't play any football. There was no football around, so we stuck to cricket. And when there was no competitive games being played, like Sussex playing other teams, and the boys wanted to play, we couldn't afford to buy proper, quote-unquote, cricket balls or bats. So we made a bat from the clementine tree or some kind of hard wood, and we knitted our balls, or used the strands of bicycle inner tubes to make the cricket balls. And we had a lot of fun playing cricket in that way. Of course, we didn't have any proper cricket pitch to play on, so we had to play on the rough ground of the club. Sometimes, of course, well, very often, we played in the road using a ball which we called the comper, which would bounce, or the rubber line ball, which would bounce. And so we learned to hook, because you didn't have any cricket pads. We learned to hook, to play properly off your legs, because you didn't want to be struck. That is how I think West Indian players would do well to go back to road cricket. I think they would learn how to play the short pitch ball and so on. So many a person, of course, would be struck, but you learned how to negotiate that type of delivery, the short pitch delivery, and so on. And some of the bowlers were very, very quick. So you can imagine you're playing in the road, you had to deal with that. Now, let me move from the Sussex Cricket Ground and playing of cricket to talk about some of the other games that we played. Lilliputian cricket, which we call marble cricket, interestingly enough, and there was no marble in it, but we call it marble cricket, was played either in the road, because as I told before, there were very few cars in College Savannah, and very few cars passed through College Savannah. The road was not good anyway, so very few cars would pass through there. But we also played in another area near to the vicarage. Of course, it's kneeling down cricket, so you knelt down and you you played cricket. There are some boys who were very, very good at Lilliputian cricket or Neelandong cricket or marble cricket or whatever you want to refer to it as. Then, of course, we played road tennis. Now, road tennis is a popular sport in Barbados now. But you know that in the 60s and 70s, before he left College Savannah, it was a very, very popular sport. And we made our own rackets, and we used the tennis ball, and we played road tennis. Again, there were some guys who were very, very good at road tennis. So that provided a lot of, again, a lot of pleasure for us and kept us away from home. Once we had finished our chores, the boys were allowed to go and roam the village free and play their sports. Our parents accepted that we were going to play. Now, there was a lot to occupy our youthful energies in College Savannah. Bees made their hives, especially near the storm house, as I told you about earlier, or near what we call the cutting, because I don't know if you know that the train used to pass to the east and north of College Savannah on its way down to Belle Plaine and so on. So there were train lines, and we called the area the cutting. There was a guy in College Savannah, he was older than we were, and our parents, certainly my parents didn't want me, my mother didn't want me to mix with him. They considered him to a mischievous fellow. We called him Dagwood. Dagwood was an expert at cutting honey. That's what we call it, cutting honey, or smutting the bees. So he would direct us to collect cow down, dried cow down, put in containers, buckets. I would be one of the boys helping to carry the bucket with and get the smut ready. We would smut the bees. Of course, once we lit the cow down, the smoke would cause the bees to move away, and they would leave the hive there with the honey comb. So Dagwood was good at taking the comb away. So he would bring the comb, we would actually suck the honey from the comb. Sometimes, of course, we suck the young bees as well. But it was a great experience to go smutting bees. You would, of course, know that sometimes we were stung. And let me give you a little story of this stinging of the bees. My mother, as I told you before, didn't want me to go around with Dagwood doing anything, smutting bees or whatever. But I left and went. I must have been about 8 years old. And I was stung over my eye, my left eye. And of course it quickly became swollen. When I got home, my mother was waiting. And although she saw that I had a swollen eye, I was still flogged. My father, when he came home, told her that he didn't know why she did that, because I'm a boy. As far as he was concerned, his son could take part in activities like that. But that smutting the bees was something that we enjoyed doing, particularly in the long vacation. You know, we would take part in that kind of activity. And honey is good for you. I don't know the young bees that we took in and swallowed as well would have been so good, but then again, when you're a boy is a boy. Of course, there were other games that we played. Dominoes, and domino playing was very competitive. And if you were given a sow, 6 love, you had to drink a large, a large container with lemonade. You would have to drink that. That was your punishment for losing. So that was an interesting activity. There was a game called Potter. I don't think you would know about that. We used to play it with, and very often on a step with a drawn out area to play on, and we played it with the covers of sweet drinks. So let's say you get a Coke stopper, and you had that, you played the game with that. The girls, of course, played hopscotch and rounders and the mullet games that you played. There was no electricity in Savannah, by the way, when I was a child. Electricity came to the area in the 60s. So we cherished the moonlight. And during that time, there were all kinds of games that we played at night, including hide and seek. Wherever there was a trash heap, people go and hide in the trash heap. So we made fly sticks to catch the birds, and very often we caught people's fowls, because everyone in Savannah had fowls. And sometimes we caught the fowls. We made mongoose traps too. Goddard was an expert at making mongoose traps again. Now the mongoose traps provided a lot of entertainment because, first of all, mongoose, as far as we were concerned, the mongoose was a wicked creature because he ate the eggs and he caught the chickens and so on.
Well, because of the possibility of certain interest groups regarding it as animal cruelty, we have opted not to share what was done to the mongoose in his days. Instead, we will move on to early education in the community.
Now, everybody in College Savannah went to St. Mark's School, boys and girls school in Blaze Hill, St. Philip. The boys' school we often refer to as Guy Ball, the Guy Ball School. And in my time, the girls' school was headed by a lady called Doris Hunt. She became Doris Small. And the boys' school, to which I went in my early years, and then again I'll say a bit more about that. I was headed by a gentleman called Darcy Rupert Murrell. Now, Darcy Murrell was a legend. He was a flogger. That's the first thing. And most boys were afraid of him. But the parents respected him. So when Darcy Murrell rode his bicycle, he didn't have any car. When he rode his bicycle through the district, and the boys, we were playing cricket in the road, we had to stand and salute him. We stood, saluted him. And of course, some of us trembled because he would go and visit some of the parents. And if a parent told Mr. Murrell that their son was giving trouble, you could bet your last dollar that on the first day of the next school term, Darcy Murrell is going to deal with you. You imagine parents complaining to the headmaster. We call them headmasters then, they weren't principals. Headmaster for a son or daughter, or well, the headmistress for the daughter. But Darcy Murrell dealt with you in that way. That's what happened. And of course, you were always concerned that you might tell your parents that you hadn't been performing well at school. He wouldn't tell them that you were behaving bad because he dealt with that. But if you were not performing well, your parents would be informed that you weren't performing well and you were concerned about that. Fortunately for me, I was doing very well in primary school. So I wasn't afraid of that part of it. But nor was I afraid that my father or mother would tell him, because they dealt with that too at home. But there were a lot of friends who were concerned about what might be the outcome of a visit by Darcy Murrell. Now, I was flogged once by Darcy Murrell. Let me tell you, it sounds preposterous, but let me tell you what it is. I always say that I was flogged for going through the gully. There were two routes from my home to the school, through what we used to call Clotty Gully or Harrison Gully. And and the other one was the longer road around Supers and into Blades Hill. Now, in the gully, there was a lady called Mrs. Harrison who grew a number of fruit trees. So you would know that the boys would want to go through the gully. Now, my father warned me not to do that. So I used to have to take the long way around. But do you know, one morning I decided to take the shortcut. It was a little bit late to take the shortcut through the gully. When I got to school, the lady, Mrs. Harrison, was at the school complaining that the boys had stolen her fruits, had picked her fruits. And Darcy Murray was getting ready to deal with the group. I, being a college Savannah boy, found myself in trouble as well, even though I did not have anything to do with the picking of the fruits. Darcy Murray decided that once you were from college Savannah, you were going to be flogged, because the lady said that there were the Savannah boys that picked the fruits. She was right, but I certainly was not part of the group picking the fruits. But I was also flogged, and of course there's nothing you could do. I couldn't go home and tell my father that I was flogged. And well, let me tell you something about this flogging thing and telling father. I was flogged by one of the teachers at the primary school once. Now, I was pretty talkative in school, and there was a guy called P. Bob Nichols, very, very famous teacher at St. Mark's Primary School. He gave me a flogging, and I stupidly went home and told my father. No. He paused and he said, "What did you do?" I said, "Nothing." And my father looked at my mother. He said, "Have you know any mad teachers at St. Mark's Primary School? St. Mark's Boys School?" She said, "No." He said, "Well, me neither. I pass through that area all the time. I don't see any mad teachers." He said, "So why would the teachers mad to just beat you for nothing?" And I got another flogging. So I was flogged by him for I went through primary school to secondary school. I never went home and reported being punished. Not just flogged, being punished for anything. Because I knew exactly how my father would have reacted. So the school, Darcy Murrell named his strap after the first boy that was flogged by his new strap. If he bought a new strap and you were flogged first, Sherwood, you could bet that the strap is going to be called Sherwood, and Sherwood is going to descend on people in the school. Now, there were some St. Mark's boys who would try to hide away from school, play truant. Now, playing truant was a dangerous thing with Darcy Murrell, because he was going to send for you. He had a group of big boys in the school, because in those days, the primary schools, you went to 7th standard if you were good enough. And he would have a group of boys in the 7th class, 7, and so on, assemble to go looking for you. And they would come and find you wherever you are, hiding in the canes, among the trees, near the Three Houses Spring or Fortescue Spring, and you were taken back to school. And Darcy Murrell flogged you in front of the school. That's the way he dealt with it. You ran away from school. Playing truant from school was a no. And he wanted the best for the boys in his school, and of course, he would tell you all the time about the boys who passed through St. Mark's and who did well, and he expected you to do well. Those were the days when doing well was not excused. There are a number of reasons now we offer, and correctly so, for children not performing. There's some children who genuinely have problems, but he would not accept that. In those days, he didn't accept that. So not doing work and not performing was a reason to be punished, and so boys, you could be punished. Now, the school had a garden, and we would go into the garden, and we grew vegetables like carrots and beets and so on. And sometimes we would go in, and when teacher was around, then we would pull up the carrots, eat them, and plant back the stalks. And then a few days later, Darcy would see the stalk drying up. But the boys who he considers to be bright he never felt that they were guilty ones. So I never was punished for that, even though I took part in it. And you know, I joined some of the boys sometimes in doing that. So and then of course there was the milk room. You know, in those days there was no school meals when I was a schoolboy, primary school boy. That came after I left and gone on to secondary school. So you had to take turns in going into the milk room to mix milk and get biscuits ready for the children as they came out for bread. Those were the sweetest Eclipse biscuit I know about. And the boys, we used to take a pencil and scrawl them up, the biscuits, because we felt that they were going to taste better. You know, I don't know I would know. When I grew big, I would know that is nonsense. But we did that. We scrawled up the biscuits and once you were part of the milk room crew, you got, of course, more milk and more biscuits than anybody else. So that was another activity which we engaged in primary school. When I first went to school, 1955, I went to the boys' school, which was called I said with Darcy Murrell. The hurricane came in 1955, and I'll say something about the hurricane later. In 1955, and we went over, we had to take turns in going over to the morning, evening to the girls' school. Then in 1957, government stopped with the boys and girls' school and created the junior and senior schools. So I had to go over at age 7 to the junior school, which was previously the girls' school. And when I reached age 9, I went back over to the senior school, which was previously the boys' school. That's how it worked. So I had a taste of both schools. And of course, I was also flogged by the headmistress at the other school. It's not that I was the worst child, but I used to join this. There was an incline in school, a grassy area, and we used to put water on the thing with the mix and then skate down the hill. And of course, going down that hill, you fall sometimes, you tumble over. And the head teacher flogged me for being one of the culprits who skated down the hill. Right, so, but I thoroughly enjoyed my primary school days. As I said before, College Savannah children all went there. One of the interesting things was that boys from the districts, College Savannah and the surrounding districts, went to school for the most part barefooted in those early days. My mother made sure that I wear shoes from day one, and I was punished for what I'm going to tell you about now. I went to school with my cousin. He was bigger than I was, so older than I was, so I went along with him. And on my way, I realized none of the boys were wearing shoes. I wearing shoes. I decided to take off my shoes, put them in my bag, and go to school. First of all, my class teacher was surprised that I came to school barefooted. I don't remember what excuse I gave, something about toe being bad or something. But when I got home, my cousin told my mother that was a flogging, because she wanted me to wear shoes. That was her position. So I had to wear shoes while the majority of the boys were barefooted at school. One thing that made me glad that that she insisted on wearing shoes was that one boy he received a puncture with a nail walking through, because when the rain fell and water was traveling along the side of the road, you walked and through the water, and he got his foot punctured with a nail. Didn't pay any attention to it. His parents apparently, I don't know if his parents knew, but the next thing we knew is that he developed tetanus and he died. It was my first experience of a young person dying, and that almost traumatized me, because all the time I felt that only old people die, because the only people I knew who died would have been old people. Not long after that, I had another traumatic experience, because a house burnt on Fields Hill next to near the school, and 3 children were burnt in that fire. So you can imagine, how we felt. School was closed that day, and so on. So St. Mark's provided a wide range of experiences for us, and we, called Savannah folk, relish the experiences. You did all kinds of things at school, and then you went home, and I hope that nobody reported any mischievous behavior that you engaged in.
And we thank you, Mr. Goddard, for sharing your memories of life in College Savannah when you were a child. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I think I need to issue the call again for students of history and researchers to see this as primary research that could lead you to further research as we continue to tell our stories and write our own histories. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been My Community.